The following is a recount of a profound non-dual experience that I had on August 14th, 2021 at approximately 12:50 a.m. On August 14th, 2021, I had the most profound, beautiful, and intense experience of my life thus far. An experience so far beyond the dualistic conventions of phenomenological existence that at the time, there was absolutely no way I could linguistically encapsulate it. I have spent the past year and a half contemplating and integrating the events that occurred on that night. It was an experience that has impacted me in every iota of my being and will forever stay with me. I did not perceive this as a typical spatio-temporal experience, but in writing this, I must make concessions for the sake of linguistic and logical continuity, and thus please understand that this recount is just a small approximation of a fraction of what transpired. This profound unitive experience occurred after roughly 7 years of daily meditative practice and after several profound experiences with psychedelic substances, including cannabis, psilocybin, LSD, and DMT. In the 2 months leading up to this experience, I had been intensely contemplating the nature of existence and consciousness to a degree which I had not done before. This intense contemplation resulted in my existing meditative practice becoming amplified. I found myself meditating for several hours per day, to the point that I decided to make my life a waking meditative practice, and therefore, every action I took, from waking to sleeping, was seen to be the totality of existence functioning through and as myself as an individuated node. I did my best to stay in this state for 2 months leading up to this experience. The source of all of this intense spiritual work was a particular query that I had at the time. Despite all of my prior experience with meditation, contemplation, books, and psychedelics, I was still under the assumption that there was a center or a core to my experience of existence, a perceptual core to the very experience of existence that is shared by all life forms. I was under the fundamental assumption that there was a ground to the totality, and that even though I intuitively knew that there was no ground to existence, I did not yet experientially live it. In short, there was still identification with the idea of a witness in my experience. There was still the last vestige of ego identification. There was still a speck of diluted density driving my perceptual experience of life. And it was this schism that drove the intensity of my spiritual work. And thus, I continue with the intensity of my contemplations and meditations during this time so that I may directly experience existence itself. The intensity in my spiritual work resulted in a subtle yet extremely profound shift in my conscious awareness and perception of existence, similar to what I experienced in late 2020 right before my first experience with dimethyltryptamine. However, this shift was much more intense and powerful. Again, there was not a specific point in time that I perceived this shift occurring. It was gradual, subtle, and unmistakable. As a result of such intense non-dual work in the 2 months preceding this experience, there was a shift in my conscious awareness from that of ego identification with a body-mind complex to that of perceiving and operating from a place of fundamental, permanent, unmoving beingness. Each day, I felt increasingly more perceptive of the dream of existence that this experience of life is. Again, every action and everything I perceived felt simultaneously like the most profound thing in all of existence, as well as simply a normal mundane happening. The feeling of being and perceiving as a demarcated human organism felt more and more ephemeral. It feels increasingly surreal and dreamlike, yet grounded and mundane. However, despite all of this, I was still under the assumption that there was a core to existence, a core to experience, a core to being. Additionally, during these preceding 2 months, I gained insight into the existential importance of self-expression. I realized that the highest apotheosis that an organism could achieve was to embody the highest expression of themselves in their life experience, thusly allowing the totality of existence to experience itself that much more fully through the expression of their individuation. Additionally, in order to exist as the most complete vector of existence that one can possibly be, it must be done from a place of absolute zero insistence, and zero ego-driven survival agenda. All personal density would need to be released for an individuation to most fully embody the aspect of existence that they represent. In short, I felt and deeply intuited at this time the paradox in which, in order for a life to be most fully embodied, it must be fully surrendered, down to the last subatomic particle. On the day of this experience, I had been in a waking meditative state for roughly 15 hours, and I had completed a 3-hour walking meditation at one of the parks in my town earlier that day. I was up late into the night. I usually go to sleep no later than 10:30 most nights. However, on this night, I had stayed up much later than I normally do. It was around 12:50 a.m. that I was getting ready to go to sleep. However, I decided to use the bathroom quickly before I went to bed. As I finished using the bathroom, I went to wash my hands, and I took a moment to look at my reflection in the mirror. When I did, something extraordinarily profound occurred that I do not think can be captured in the dualistic conventions of thought and language. A realization and a transformation beyond all realms of phenomena occurred. And in that split second, I did not recognize what was looking back at me. As I stared into the mirror, for what may have only been 20 or 30 seconds, I did not register what a human organism was. I did not know what was looking back, but what I saw looking back in the reflection was not me. I saw this wonderful, beautiful, infinite, indescribable thing looking back at me. There was no looker, no perceiver, no reflection. All sense of orienting duality ceased to be. There was only existence itself, pure and simple. There was no center point anymore, just pure existence, the absolute zero, and the absolute infinity. The distinction between subject and object collapsed. All experience and notion of time stopped. There was no time, there was no space, just consciousness. All dualities collapsed. In less than a single Planck time, I ceased to exist. I became fully aware of the absolute reality of my personal existence and of existence in general. It was revealed to be profoundly obvious that I was never born, can never die, and that I had never lived a human life on Earth. All concept of being a human, of having a sense of self, of living, of ever having been born, all ceased their relevance in my experience, and paradoxically, there was nothing that was having this experience. It was instantly and inexorably revealed and realized that there was absolutely no core to existence, no origin point of consciousness or existence. It was so obvious. The totality in all phenomenological form was groundless. It always had been, and in this place and moment, outside of space and time, I resided in, and most critically and importantly, I resided as the groundless ground of all being. In this single instant of realization, I resided in and as the paradoxical, baseless foundation for the totality of all existence. It was simultaneously the most profound realization and the most mundane realization. And in that moment, outside of space and time, and beyond all distinctions, groundless nothingness, pure existence itself was all that there was. In that moment, when I looked in that bathroom mirror, there was not a person standing looking back in a mirror. There was not a reflection staring back at me. There was not a house I was standing in. There was not a planet that I had lived on. In that moment, all that there ever was, all that there ever has been or ever could be, was infinite absolute nothingness, the unmanifest, pure consciousness, the Godhead. There was only existence itself in all of its infinitely unknowable and intimately knowable infinity. In this experience, now only a few seconds in, there was only existence. As I washed my hands, it was clearly and most obviously perceived that this body, this mind, this life, and every iota of every event that had ever occurred or will ever occur is nothing more than a prop, a dream within the consciousness of existence itself. As I washed my hands, I was aware that there was nothing washing its hands. Nothingness comprised the atoms of the water that flowed out of the faucet and onto my hands. The body-mind complex became overwhelmed with emotions at this point, at the sheer splendor of existence, and I began to cry. Eventually, sobbing as the tears for the infinite beauty of being and non-being flowed. The dream avatar of my body-mind complex carried out the motions of turning off the faucet, turning off the lights, and exiting the bathroom. I left the bathroom and walked back in my room in absolute awe. I felt the whole of existence was wide open to me. Time and space indeed felt like increasingly foreign concepts, because now there was only perceived to be one thing in existence, only consciousness, only the Godhead. I felt as though this was the first time I had ever seen any of reality at all, even though at this point in my spiritual development, and even though at this point in my non-dual understanding, I had had several profound unitive experiences in the past, both from meditation and from psychedelics. I was washed over by complete happiness and ecstatic bliss beyond my ability to process. As I walked into my room, the body-mind complex indeed moved through the idea of space, through the idea of time. However, I did not experience it as walking through a hallway to my room. Instead, I experienced it as the totality of existence exploring itself and creating the experience of transforming its dream environment from one to another. Everything felt like a movement of the universe. There was no movement through space, no movement through time, no perception through a singular organism, as these were all seen to be entirely illusory fabrications of the universal mind, only existing for the purpose of the totality to explore itself through this realm of existence. Everything was experienced as an integral movement of the entirety of the universe. This is obvious to such a deep degree that the notion of being human, the notion of space, the notion of time, the notion of physicality, all of these were simultaneously so profoundly foreign to me, yet felt closer to home than the cells that comprise my own body. As I entered my room, the profundity of the obviousness of the unity, wholeness, and beauty of existence flooded my entire perceptual experience. I dropped to the floor and laid there in sheer awe and ecstasy. I was in pure admiration for the beauty and depth of the dream of the totality, of this realm and of all realms. Although my perception had already gone through a major shift in consciousness 2 months prior, and I was already perceiving this dream we call life from a non-dual perspective, there had been a tiny speck of an egoic witness left up to this point. However, now there was not even a witness left, just existence, just the pure happening of existence, now and forever, eternally, as there can be no other way. Every single aspect of this experience, of life, living as a human, earth, space, time, the entirety of the physical universe, all form in its entirety without exception, was immediately and inexorably seen to be an illusory dream. I saw the depth and beauty of this dream so deeply and so profoundly that all I could do was lay there and weep tears of joy in pure, honest gratitude. Every atom of my being experienced a gratitude for which no language on earth will ever have words to encapsulate. I was grateful and overjoyed beyond what I could comprehend, just to have the opportunity to exist for even a single fraction of a femtosecond. I recognized that this physical life is literally just a dream that is being had by existence, which is literally yourself, and that every realm of existence that could ever manifest is yourself, experienced from a different perspective of the infinite fractal dream of the totality. And because the fractal of existence is infinite, it has no beginning and no end. Because it is infinite, it has no center, no ground, and thus the totality is contained within every iota of form that could ever be. All form and all realms of existence are fundamentally equal because they are all literally the exact same thing. The One, the unmanifest Godhead. The most advanced civilizations in the multiverse, and me laying in universal awe in my room, were all immediately seen to be one and the same. The dream of the totality was seen to be all that there is. This physical life that we are living here on Earth was seen to be completely synonymous with the absolute. It was finally seen to be ultimate reality. Because again, there is no demarcation. This is heaven. Existence itself is heaven. I saw heaven in every iota of my experience as I lay there in my room. I saw the carpet on the floor in my room to be equally as important, equally as profound, and equally as beautiful as everything I had ever seen in all of my experiences with psilocybin, LSD, and DMT combined. It was in this moment that in my perception, I could not differentiate any aspect of phenomena from the ultimate, from the Godhead, from the Absolute. At this point, the level of infinite universal love, profundity, and intensity was several orders of magnitude greater than any non-dual unitive experience I had ever had before. The realizations of this experience were so profoundly encompassing that it made my prior breakthrough experience with dimethyltryptamine look like a child's toy. This was truly beyond absolute infinity, beyond phenomena, in fact, beyond the concept of experience itself. Because in this shift, there was no space, no time, no observer, no human named TR having an experience. To even say that there was pure consciousness is too much. There was just existence itself, plain and simple, simultaneously the most profound and the most mundane in one, and neither at all. All of this was perceived to be so obvious. There is no core, only existence itself. This is what I am. This is what we all are, pure existence. The thought arose to record this experience, so I went to my computer, which was still on at the time, and began to type. Tears of awe, gratitude, and sheer overwhelmment continued to stream down my face. The realizations of the illusory nature of form only deepened, and the utter futility of writing became so apparent that I had to stop. Within about a minute, the concept of writing was seen to be far too limited of a medium to encapsulate any of what was occurring. Additionally, the complete meaninglessness of absolutely everything was made glaringly apparent, so much so that while this was occurring, I literally found the carpet on the floor in my room more interesting and more important than all the profound realizations I was having, or for that matter, any profound spiritual experience that a human being could have. It was so paradoxical that my utter lack of care for this most profound experience only deepened, and thus I cried more. I laid on the floor again and just said, wow, wow, oh wow. And then I said, thank you for everything. Over and over again, I was utterly compelled to give thanks and praise for existence itself. As I continued to say thank you over and over again, I was filled and overjoyed with happiness and began to laugh like a child. I continued to give thanks to existence while laughing with tears of joy streaming down my face. I could barely get my words out, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Nothing at all. It was, is, and will always be perfect. I became like a little kid again, laughing about all of this, laughing about the totality of existence, laughing at all form that could ever exist, laughing at the universe, laughing at the multiverse, laughing at duality, laughing at limitation, laughing at the infinite drama of creation. It then dawned on me that all we can ever know of reality in the universe as a human organism must come through the perceptual filters of our five senses. I thought the idea of having spatiotemporal, biological sensory mechanisms was so strange, and yet I had used these mechanisms every second of my life. It was through these five perceptual gates that I knew everything that I called reality and experience. However, in this state of consciousness, my own human senses of vision, smell, touch, hearing, and taste seem like alien concepts. To this very day, even after so much time contemplating this experience, I struggle to find the proper vocabulary to encapsulate the sheer profound strangeness of this feeling. But ever since this experience, the very sensory mechanisms that I and every other organism on Earth and beyond have used to know and interpret all of life and experience were entirely seen to be just filters used to explore a very small and limited area of existence, but a valid and important exploration nonetheless. I thought the idea of sensory perception was utterly hilarious due to how it can limit and radically filter the experience of the totality. But even with the incontrovertible recognition of the limitation of perception and form, I was still immensely grateful to even be able to experience any of existence through even the tiniest and most minute of sensory perception. Every iota of experience and sensory perception was seen to be a gift, the greatest gift. In my immense gratitude for sensory perception, I decided to explore reality using these wonderful perceptual tools that had been gifted to me. I simply observed, explored, and took in the experience of my room with the full awareness that this is all a dream that is being had by the totality. And yet, I was like a baby, taking in sensory experience as if for the first time, rediscovering the novelty of simply exploring through the senses as a baby would. I went over to a reusable shopping bag that I had laying in my room at the time, and I decided to investigate it. Simply being able to feel it, to feel my fingers run along its surface, seeing what color it was, and so on. It was like witnessing the first object of one's life after being born. An absolutely indescribable and ineffable experience of alien beauty. And yet, that experience is present in absolutely every moment of everything that we will ever do. Concurrently, I was also washed with the immense and encompassing feeling of infinite universal love. I had this infinite feeling of love in other prior non-dual and psychedelic experiences, and every time it becomes more and more profound, more and more beautiful. Just when I think reality cannot become any more beautiful, it shows even more of its nature and splendor as I continue to do this work. If we as physical beings were to experience the true depth and love and beauty of existence, it would result in one's complete and utter obliteration at its radiance. In every object in my room that I investigated and explored through my senses, I also expressed deep and immense love for and gratitude for, as every object again was seen to be the absolute, the unmanifest Godhead, and simultaneously, it was all seen to be another aspect of myself. This profound experience of realization went on for about 2 hours. I cried until my tear ducts were exhausted, I laughed until my head hurt, and I was absolutely, mentally and physically overwhelmed by the experience, and even more overwhelmed by the sheer amount of love and gratitude that I felt to simply exist. It was made so incontrovertibly obvious to me that there was absolutely no foundational ground of existence, no origin point, no cause for all of this. It simply is, existing paradoxically and simultaneously as, beyond, and outside the bounds of logic, duality, thought, and phenomena. The totality exists as an absolute zero, and thus I am an absolute zero, infinite nothingness, and so is everything else in all of existence. And it is from this point of absolute zero, of absolute nothingness, that the entirety of the phenomenological menagerie of the totality of existence is made manifest. Absolute emptiness is absolute form. Again, even after years of contemplation on this experience, the linguistics of capturing this experience still elude me. In reality, what I felt in every iota of my being as this was transpiring is that there is less than nothing that comprises the totality. There's not even nothing. There's no word to describe it. There was never anything here to begin with. There was no foundation to existence. There is no substance, no substrate, no ground. The idea of a demarcated spatio-temporal life was unreal. The idea of separate forms were unreal. There was only existence itself. There is only existence itself. Existence is absolute nothingness and absolute infinity, paradoxically and simultaneously. For the next 2 hours until I fell asleep, it became increasingly and overwhelmingly obvious that there is absolutely no division to any of existence. That this, right here, is the ultimate reality. That in that moment of me simply laying in my room was ultimate reality. That everything that could ever be is ultimate reality. There is no demarcation, no division point. This is ultimate reality. The most deeply impactful and recontextualizing realization I learned from this experience was the paradox that this totality is founded upon. All of existence is a paradox. All of existence is a strange loop. All seemingly apparent dualities are ultimately unified through paradox. The absolute zero fundamentally is the exact same as absolute infinity. Form does not take any precedent over emptiness because emptiness literally is form. I also realized that all of the spiritual profundity I had just experienced, whilst all valid and life-changing for me, was utterly and entirely meaningless. Meaningless to a degree that I will never be able to encapsulate in language. And that is the level of spiritual beauty and profundity juxtaposed with the absolute meaninglessness that is the critical point of paradox for which the totality rests upon. I came to realize that although non-dual realization can yield the most profound and impactful transformations that the human species will ever experience, that ultimately spirituality and enlightenment are less important than a piece of carpet on the floor. All of my spiritual work, truly, is not being done for any purpose than the simple doing of it. In truth, nobody ever has to know about this experience or about any other profound spiritual experiences that I will ever have, despite the benefit that it could bring to other people. Other people being individuated vectors of the totality of existence. The only thing that matters is the infinite explorations of existence, and even that ultimately means nothing for the unmanifest Godhead. Even me attempting to share this experience is a fool's errand. No matter how well I write, no matter how many years I dedicate my life to non-dual study, the human experience known as TR is just that, an experience, fundamentally illusory, a demarcated dream that the totality is exploring itself with for a fraction of a Planck time. Ultimately, nothing I ever do will ever be able to describe even a single iota of the absolute splendor of existence. Existence cannot be described linguistically because it is beyond concepts. It is infinite. It is incomprehensible. But most fundamentally, it simply is. It transcends and includes everything. Even spiritual enlightenment is somewhat of a fallacy, because humans know reality through experience, and organismic experience is inherently dualistic. Enlightenment is not an event. It is not an experience. Events and experiences are phenomena, illusory demarcations of form within consciousness, and thus are not ultimate reality. Enlightenment is existence itself. However, even in having an incontrovertible knowing of this, I still happily dedicate my life to non-dual understanding, simply because I am in love with it.